Chapter 17, Step 5, Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. So we completed the fourth step and have it in hand ready to present to our sponsor, counselor, clergy, or other. To verbally present it, it takes a lot of effort. We have just written an honest and thorough inventory of our actions, and we are prone to hesitate. A fifth step worksheet has been designed at www.treatmentguide4u.com. That's www.treatmentguide4u.com. The shame and isolation of our addictions told us that we are different from others in our core beliefs about ourselves. In the fifth step, we take action by sharing this with another person and God as we understood Him. This reference positions us to share a very personal element of who we are with the outside world. We usually took parts of our past and shared it with people who were prone to co-sign our previous addictive behaviors, which kept us from making personal change. This is an effort to share the most sensitive and vulnerable information about ourselves with one person. We are at an edge of a cliff, not being able to see what the outcome will be. This is firming up our position in taking the concepts of recovery and putting them into action. In proceeding with this step, we are continuing the effort from the previous steps and trusting something outside of ourselves. This is a deeper conviction to trust that we are taking. We haven't been let down up to now. When letting our presence be known at a 12-step meeting by saying, "My name is blank, and I am an addict or alcoholic," we are heard and welcomed. When we sat down and reviewed our first step with our sponsor, counselor, 12-step group, we felt the outside shell of our hardened denial peeling away. In Step 2, when we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves, we felt hope for the first time in a long time. We were able to ask for help and became teachable. In the third step, we were willing to let go of our control and trust a force outside of ourselves. This step of action provides us with the strength to make change in our lives by taking direction and implementing it into our lives. The byproduct of this gives us a feeling of being part of something greater than ourselves. The fourth step took us to a new awareness of ourselves, and the effort took tremendous courage. We found a new realization of ourselves, bringing light to the darkness of the corners of our past. This effort up to now has proven remarkable. We are not alone anymore. We know that the footsteps we are taking are unfolding a path where we see encouragement in the person that we are becoming. Most of us are concerned about what others will think of us when we share our true feelings, thoughts, and actions. This effort is building the strength in beliefs not only with a loving God, but of trusting another human being. This effort fortifies our trust in our relationship with another. This roadmap to recovery leaves us with the risk of trusting others, with our secrets which we have been holding on to throughout our lives. This effort breaks through the final grains of denial which we have been lingering in our thoughts of our past addictions. It brings us again to the forefront of our minds, a clear picture of our past. Here is where we need to focus on the safest and most direct route on this path of recovery. This roadmap will define clarity of purpose. Granted, this effort of sharing our fifth step with another person is like jumping into the deep end of a swimming pool. But often we find that there is a way to build trust with others who are accepting of us. In this fifth step, we may be sharing a large part of who we are in many relationships. Our listener and our higher power are going to hear the entire picture of our life experience, the good with the bad. When we set up an appointment to present our fifth step, we are showing the person we selected to hear that we are serious about our recovery. Who we select is a personal decision. In their first attempt at presenting the fifth step, may feel more comfortable sharing with someone from the clergy or a counselor who is also in recovery. This type of listener is bound by professional confidentiality to keep your information private. There are, of course, certain exceptions, such as when a person doing the fifth step reports to the listener that they intend to cause or have caused physical or sexual harm to someone. But for most of us, the reporting is going to remain confidential, which provides a sense of security, especially for those presenting for the first time. I always suggest that the person chosen to hear the fifth step should also be in 12-step recovery. This way, the presenter knows that the person listening understands the process of the step. Using a sponsor is a time-honored method of processing a fifth step. Even if you do process the fifth step with a professional, I suggest you also share it with your sponsor. That person should know you and your needs by now, so trust him or her in this process. Having a quiet place to share your step is suggested. It is important to provide a safe place where we can bring these experiences and emotions to the surface. We are not simply sharing our fourth step by processing our fifth step. We are acknowledging and accepting the exact nature of our wrongs. This means we must take into consideration our intent in sharing the information at hand. Am I looking for some type of gain besides sharing it with another person? The first time I shared a fifth step, I was in legal trouble. I was in a treatment center, trying to remain in compliance to avoid the legal issues I was facing. I thought, if I complete the fifth step, I would be doing what is expected of me. Then, once I met their expectations, I believed I could go back into being in control of my life again. Moving from compliance to acceptance of a problem, I internalized the reason for change occurring in my life. As I said before, most people face their issues as a result of some type of intervention. There is external consequences that drive the person addressing their problem in the beginning. Eventually, however, a person has to move from external motivators for change to internal motivators for change. As said before, we must identify reasons for ourselves to proceed in trusting something or someone outside of ourselves. This is a difficult adjustment because our condition of not trusting others is a core issue underlying addictions. We are transforming our beliefs into a new perspective. How can we be sure we're ready for this step? By not being invested in what the outcome of this step will provide. We become invested in sharing the sensitive material in the fifth step, but not to enhance a position of control back into our lives. It becomes evident to us that this is a natural transition in becoming more than what we thought we were. We are doing this step because it will reassure us in taking further steps away from the emptiness of addiction. To begin a fifth step, you may say a simple prayer with your sponsor, asking your higher power, a loving God of your understanding, to be present during this time. Sharing a prayer with your sponsor or person who is there can offer strength to present this fearless moral inventory. I had a client set up an appointment to share his fifth step. He was wilderness-oriented, so I took him on a hike. At the top of a tall ridge, we built a fire. To get things going, I began a prayer and asked the client to pray too, because the step requires it be done with a God of your understanding and another person. I usually ask God, as you understood him, to place a circle of protection around us while we process this step. As the man began to share his fifth step, snow began to fall. His sharing took almost 2 hours, and when we were done, we looked around and there was about 3 inches of snowfall all around us. We noticed it was dry in a 15-foot perfect circle around us. Yes, science may prove that it was the heat rising from the fire that caused the circle of snow to be melted, but it still was an experience of significance to both of us. It is important to keep an open mind to the presence of a loving force in our lives being around us during the fifth step, even if you're an atheist or an agnostic. Believing in a loving God or a power outside of us involved in the process of recovery strengthens our efforts. Once we begin to share, we may feel nervous and our gut may feel like jelly. We may have a quiver in our voice as we're going over our inventory. When we look up, however, we see the caring reassurance of the sponsor, counselor, or person who is asked to listen to our fifth step. The person listening may ask questions pertaining to what we are sharing. They may inject personal experiences to what we are sharing. We may even laugh at the absurdity at some of the lies we told to cover our tracks in our addictions. When we share openly with another person about our experience and engage in interaction, we begin to see that our actions were common to others, and the severity of the judgment we made about ourselves wasn't warranted. Although the person we chose is there for us in the same time-honored way that many others have been there for others in sharing their fifth step, they may need to know other details and will ask questions. Presenting the exact nature of our wrongs to another person, we are sharing not only the lies we told to others and ourselves, but the underlying motive that fed our addictions. Here are some examples. The addict who continued their personal selfishness and self-serving behaviors caused others to suffer. The person who continued to be abused from a relationship to another failed to look at their lack of self-care and nurturing that placed them in harm's way. The victim's circumstances continued to abuse their substances to numb their pain, creating an unresolved sense of grief and trauma. The person who avoided any intimacy with others created a prison of isolation in their addictions. All these are an underlying thread that put us into a pattern of being an isolator, controller, and victim to others and ourselves. If I don't see the core issue underneath the violations, I cannot learn another course of action. The fifth step paints a picture that weaves throughout our lives. How can we escape the maze if we don't realize it is a construction of our own doing? I am not placing responsibility onto the victim who was raped while intoxicated, placing them in harm's way. I am putting responsibility on addictions that rob the person of the clarity of mind and safety, which place them in the reach of their offenders. The offender was the one who was responsible for the abuse perpetrated. However, predators will seek out prey that is accessible and vulnerable. There is a tremendous release of guilt, shame, pain, and fear when sharing the fifth step. We are awakening emotions that have remained deep within ourselves. As said before, there are no guarantees of the outcome. This can bring out other issues to the surface that need to be continued at a later time for closure. It is a doorway that we are opening for the purpose of not only building the ability to share our emotions with others, but to gain insight and acceptance of the wreckage of the past. We may wait to share the most sensitive materials of our past at the end of our fifth step. As long as we present the information about our victimization, patterns of abuse of others, or intense isolation from others, we have done our job. Often it is hard for us to list the positive aspects of our life experience when we have delved into the depth of our darkest memories. We may not feel the words as being positive, but it is important to share our strengths. Make sure that you have a lot of water during the presentation. Why? Because when we're stressed, we become dehydrated, and it's important to feel clear-headed during the process of our presentation. We're astounded by the interest our sponsors and our support person in hearing a presentation offered during the fifth step. Often we feel like we just swam the English Channel in completing this effort. Many of us are plagued by the uncompleted efforts in our lives due to our addictions and fear. This valiant effort becomes complete without causing any serious harm to ourselves. In fact, it just brought us intensely closer to another human being. It gets confusing for most of us thinking that this step aids us in a spiritual awakening, when in fact most of us don't even know what that really means. To begin with, we are creating an emotional awakening of an internal voice that has been silenced for a long time. We see hope beginning to build in our lives towards a life in recovery. Not only are we leaving behind a lifestyle of addiction, but we are growing into a person with dignity and maturity. This concept of an awakening of our spiritual nature means that we are not alone in this world. We may hear from others what their experience was in sharing their fifth step at a meeting. We see that it was a positive experience for everyone who worked this step and brought further meaning into their lives. After sharing this with another person, often we feel a sense of relief. We have taken a leap of faith by revealing the entire image of who we are to another person. We have looked deeply into their eyes, searching for acceptance. If we have found it, we feel a sense of deliverance from the isolation that we have been living with. Not only are we beginning to trust in relationships, but we are bringing a true sense of awareness into our own lives. We have shared our most inward secrets and were not rejected. The cat's out of the bag, and our ability to share with others has become easier. Yes, there is a lot of work to be done, but we now have hope. By sharing our load with another person, we free ourselves of the confines of our personal prison. If I have had a limp for years and I simply rest the muscle by not walking on it for a period of time, I will continue, in the long run, to have a limp. If, however, I do rehabilitative work to strengthen both of my legs and use other resources to assist my balance, I might be able to return to a normal pattern of walking. Many people go through their entire lives without feeling a sense of purpose, driven to alter their direction. Working the fifth step helps remove the obstacles in our lives, which makes our path in recovery less tedious. I was in a halfway house in Minneapolis called Progress Valley when an artist who had gone through the program donated a painting he made in gratitude to them. It was a man on a path leading down into a beautiful valley. 14 years later, I was visiting a treatment program in Phoenix called Valley of Hope. On the wall, I noticed a picture by the same artist. It was the same landscape, but now he was further down the path. In our fifth step, it is important to share everything that we are aware of with our listener in recovery. When I was in treatment for the second and the last time, I was in a program called Farmhouse, PHARM, in Minneapolis. An old minister came to listen to my fifth step. My efforts were thorough, and he was attentive to everything I said. Although I was very precise in sharing specific actions of mine, at the end he asked, "Is there anything else that was significant that you would like to share?" I told him about 2 incidents which were not criminal, but I felt extremely bad about because they were a negative effect on my family. At the end, he looked into my eyes and said, "Good job." After processing a fifth step, it is important to save your fourth step document. This can come invaluable in processing Step 6 and Step 8. By sharing this information, it is now part of our awareness in our lives. We can continue to move on from building trust with our listener to building a relationship with other people who serve as part of our recovery. We now can alter how we perceive the past and its chain of shame, guilt, pain, and fear. We have faced ourselves in the mirror and stated that our future does not have to be bound by that behavior. We have gone beyond the awareness in our lives of going through crisis to crisis. We now see how our character defects weave throughout our lives. This sets the stage for Step 6.